Hey yo, what's up, kids? This is Mr. Del Greco on the one and the twos. We're looking at China after Mao. Last week, you looked at how the Soviet Union fell, like it actually disappeared off the face of the earth, and that happened because of the guy Gorbachev. He had this great idea that if you gave people who were living under a communist government, if you let those people have freedom of speech and capitalism, he thought that they would be happy and they would allow the communists to stay in power. It didn't happen like that. Once those people got a taste of freedom, they got a taste of democracy, they got a taste of capitalism, they said, the hell with communism, get the hell rid of it, and gone. They break away from the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union ceases to exist. And now today we don't have a Soviet Union. We have it's now called Russia again. Do we have problems with Russia today? Yes, we do. If we have time this year, we'll get into it. But what we're going to look at today is what happens to China once that guy Mao Zedong, that jerk who did the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution, once he dies, what happens to China? And it's going to be really interesting because I'll tell you what doesn't happen. They don't disappear like the Soviet Union did. And you'll see why in a few minutes. So we're just going to go through this. This will probably go quicker than usual just because that's what's going to happen. So Mao Zedong, he controlled China from 1945 to 1976. He does the 5-year plan, the Great Leap Forward, the Cultural Revolution. All of these things were crappy. Millions and millions of Chinese people died. And you know what ends up happening? Eventually, Mao dies. Everybody cry for him. Look it up. Um, like most murderers, he dies of old age, comfortable in his bed. And after Mao dies, China has to move on. And so their next leader is going to be this guy, Deng Xiaoping. He's going to take over China, and what he's going to do, pay attention to this, I believe it's one of your questions. He's going to change Chinese communism. And the way he's going to change it is through a thing called the Four Modernizations. Listen, when we're talking about China, they always give everything they do these fancy names: Great Leap Forward, Cultural Revolution, blah, blah, blah. His economic reforms are going to be called the Four Modernizations. It's 4 ways he's going to try to fix communism. And the way he's going to do it is he's going to allow capitalism to be used in China. So just think about this for a minute. Communist China is going to allow capitalism. Does that make any sense? Everything we've talked about so far is that communism and capitalism are opposites and they can't exist together. Well, this guy Deng, he's going to try it. He's going to try to give the Chinese people a little bit of capitalism, not the whole thing, a little bit of capitalism. And remember what happened in the Soviet Union when they did that. The people said, forget this, screw communism, we want all capitalism. Well, watch what happens here. So Deng's going to do the 4 modernizations. And the way he's going to do it, he's going to do 4 things. So your question, what's goal number 1? Agriculture. What Deng's going to do is he's going to end collective farming. All those farms that Mao had taken from the people, he's going to give it back. He's going to allow the farmers to actually have their own land and sell their crops for a profit. So they grow enough to survive. If they have any left, they can sell it for money. Ooh. Remember that thing we talked about, profit motive? People work harder when they can make more money? Yeah, here we go. So he's going to fix the farms, goal 1. It works. Food production goes up 50%. Why? Because people work harder when there's a reward. Goal number 2, what's he going to fix? He's going to fix the factories, industry. Everything in communism is run by the government, and it doesn't work. So what does he do? He allows the Chinese people to own their own businesses. Capitalism. Again, people work harder when they get rewarded. If you go to China today, it's just like here. They have malls, they have Gucci bags and everything else. In fact, some of their cities, in fact, I would say a lot of their cities are more modern than ours. Goal 3 and 4. Goal number 3 is he's going to fix the Chinese military. What? Yeah. The Chinese military was a joke. It is not a joke anymore. Just in the past few years, they got their first aircraft carrier. They have their own stealth fighters now. Their army is absolutely huge. They have nuclear weapons. They are no joke at all. Pay attention to them in the near future. Trust me. Goal number 4, technology. Education in China is very, very important because they realize that they are in a competition with us and everybody else. And the Chinese people want to win. So they take education extremely serious. Let me tell you, there's no complaining about too much homework in China at all. I wish we had more time to talk about it. But my cousin's over there, and he became a millionaire running a tutoring company to Chinese students who were trying to get into colleges in the United States. Let me tell you, they take education seriously because that's how you win. Dumb people don't win, only the smart. And so they take education extremely seriously. So what happens because of all this? All these changes that Deng does. He gives them a little bit of capitalism, and it's like a rocket goes off. The Chinese become the number 2 economy in the world in 2010. They become the second biggest economy in the world, meaning they have more money than anybody else, except for the United States. This was in 2010. Now it is 2020. Who do you think's the number 1? Do you think we're still the United States is still number 1? Mm, mm, mm-mm. No, last time I checked, we are not. China has now passed us. They are now the number 1 economy in the world. This is what happens when you're losing competitions. All these charts are telling you the same story. The one on the left here, people in poverty. 84% of the Chinese people were considered poor in 1981. That number has plummeted because the people are making more money. The population's still booming. We know that's a problem. Their GDP, their gross domestic product, basically how much money a country has. If you look at that chart in the upper right and left here, it just their money supply is going through the roof. Now, let's talk about some problems, though. Deng let the Chinese people have a little capitalism, and they loved it. They absolutely loved it, and it worked because China got really, really rich, and the people were doing really well too. But the problem is once they got a little bit of capitalism, they wanted democracy too. You remember democracy, right? You're getting to vote for your leaders. Well, in communist China, that didn't exist. But the Chinese people said, we like this capitalism. I think we're going to like democracy too. And this is happening the exact same time that this was going on in the Soviet Union too. So the same things are happening. What ends up happening is the Chinese students decide that they're going to protest. The Chinese college students decide they're going to protest for democracy, and they have this big, huge protest in a place called Tiananmen Square. In Tiananmen Square, they have this giant protest, and you see they put a statue, like a fake Statue of Liberty up in the middle of the square. And in this protest, the Chinese students like read letters to the government saying, "Dear government, please let us have a little bit of democracy." They weren't asking for the world. They weren't trying to start a revolution. Nothing. They were looking for the opportunity to have the right to complain and fix some of the problems. Well, we saw what happened in the Soviet Union when the people started to complain. They basically took over. They got rid of communism. It's not going to happen in China. What ends up happening is the Chinese government says, "Oh, you want democracy? How about this? We'll kill you." That simple. The Chinese Communist government sends in their soldiers and their tanks to kill the protesters. This is known as the Tiananmen Square Massacre. I'll probably post a video for it probably tomorrow. because I really want you guys to see it. Um, the picture you're seeing here, the guy in front of the tanks is world famous. He's known as Tank Man. This is the morning after the Tiananmen Square massacre. This guy stands in front of the tanks and wouldn't let them leave. Cool story. We'll talk more about it tomorrow. But think about this: the Soviet Union, when the people wanted democracy in the Soviet Union, the communist government in the Soviet Union collapsed, and they gave the people what they wanted. They got democracy. They got capitalism. The Soviet Union collapsed. Now, when the Chinese people try the exact same thing, and this is all happening at the same time. So it worked in the Soviet Union. Democracy wins. When the Chinese people try it, they lose horribly. Because what the Chinese government said is, we will give you capitalism. We'll let you make money, but we will never let you have freedom, democracy. And that is what China is today. Same thing. They have capitalism, sure, but they have no freedom whatsoever. These are just some pictures from Tiananmen Square, and it's called the Tiananmen Square Massacre for a reason. Thousands of students were killed. If you ask the Chinese government about this, they deny it ever happened. Literally, they deny it ever happened. If you go on a computer and search for Tiananmen Square in China, like you go on a Chinese computer in China and put in the terms Tiananmen Square, the search results will come up 0. They control everything, and so they say this never happened. As a result of Tiananmen Square, the Chinese government, communist government, gets even stronger, and so they start controlling everything about their people. Forget freedom of speech; they have no freedom whatsoever. This picture's showing you that Google, Google, the search engine, it's not even allowed to work in China because the Chinese government controls the information that their people can see. We're going to skip this part. It's not important. Hong Kong, even though it's important today, China and Hong Kong are having big issues today. But so we're just going to talk real quick about China today. Is it one of the fastest growing economies in the world? Absolutely, it is. Yes, it is. Once they took a little capitalism and mixed it with the communism, China has exploded. They are very, very powerful in the world today. But that's not to say that China doesn't have problems of its own. So your last question is, what problems does China have today? Well, they have a really large gap between the rich people and the poor people. There's a lot more poor people, not a lot of rich people. That's never a good thing. Just so you know, the United States has that problem as well. The people have few personal freedoms. There's human rights violations all the time. As of right now, I told you guys before we left school that China has basically locked a lot of their Muslim minorities in basically concentration camps, and they're trying to brainwash them to not be Muslim. That's happening as we speak right now. That's happening. And you would think that would be bigger news in the world, but because everything else that's going on, China's getting away with anything they want. No bueno. But that's all we're going to cover for today. Hopefully everybody's doing well, and I will see you soon.